everyone. Welcome back to the Dish on Aging. Today is episode 16, and we will be answering the question, does it ever help to avoid a problem? And my quick answer is yes, it really does. And today we're going to be talking about under what circumstances it can actually be beneficial to avoid a problem. Here's what the challenge is. To avoid a problem and have that be effective, the characteristic of the problem must be there's absolutely nothing you can do to fix that problem. And if a problem cannot be fixed, then you are better off just avoiding or ignoring the problem. Here's what the challenge is. Most of the problems, the vast majority of the problems that we face in life can be fixed, or we can prevent that problem from becoming worse. But for those situations that we have no control over, it's very important to realize that there are different ways that we can avoid a problem. We can have emotional avoidance. We just don't think about it. We know there's a problem, there's nothing we can do, so we just don't think about it. The other can be verbal avoidance. We might think about that problem all the time, but we just don't talk about it. A third way that we can avoid a problem is by behavioral avoidance. Let's say the problem is there's a person, a family member, let's say, who's going to be at a family functioning and we just don't like or don't get along with, or that person has a tendency to say things that cause us to start an argument with them. And so an effective way to address that problem is, because let's say we can't fix it. We know if that person comes over and says something to us that we're just going to react and lose our temper. And we know that only happens with that one person. We don't lose our temper with anyone else. Then an effective way to solve that problem of us losing our temper is to avoid that person. And that is how behaviorally avoiding a problem or something that triggers a problem can be a very effective way of solving the problem. Okay, so Gamma Ess is on the telephone now, and she has submitted her drawing, and she wants to give us her 2 cents on the topic. Hi, Gamma.
Hi, everyone. Gamma Ess here. I'm so glad we're talking about this topic today. When we're talking about does avoiding a problem ever help, the first thing I think about as I'm out here walking my dog and listening to the presentation is the Serenity Prayer. I went and looked it up. I didn't know this. The Serenity Prayer was written by the American theologian Reinhold Niebuhr, and he lived from 1892 to 1971. So I didn't realize that the Serenity Prayer, it's more modern than I thought. I think it's based on also a Chinese proverb which would go back tens of thousands of years. But at any rate, here is the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. I got acquainted with the Serenity Prayer when I was working in the most dysfunctional work environment you could ever imagine. I found that the only way I could get through the workday was to silently recite the Serenity Prayer within my own head, and that helped me to understand that I had no control over what was happening around me. Nobody was following protocol, and I had no control over that. And it was creating the fact people were not following protocol was creating an extremely chaotic and dysfunctional and ineffective work environment. Then at the end of the week, we'd have the staff meeting, and I'd be called on the red carpet, so to speak, and being reprimanded by a coworker, not even a supervisor, but a coworker, about why I didn't speak up at a particular moment when somebody was not following protocol. And my answer was, well, I recited the Serenity Prayer within my own head and realized the only thing speaking up would do in that situation would have been to start an argument. And it would not have helped or corrected that situation in that moment at all. And what surprised me about sharing that in a staff meeting is that many of my coworkers then in subsequent staff meetings started saying they were doing the same thing. And I don't know if it had any impact on reducing the chaos in the work environment because we had no control over that as line staff employees. But it did help me learn how to stay calm, and I learned to speak up when speaking up would be able to make an impact, and to avoid or ignore the problem if I was pretty sure that speaking up would only make things worse. So I wanted to share that with you all today to help maybe to get a different perspective or an additional perspective on today's topic. Thank you. See you next week.
That is a powerful story, Gamma. Thank you. As many of you may or may not know, probably many of you do, the Serenity Prayer has actually been incorporated into 12-step programs. And ironically enough, it's sort of the idea within 12-step programs is the reason why the problem gets worse or deteriorates, whether it's an alcohol addiction, a drug addiction, overeating, a gambling addiction, is because the important part of recovery is the person recognizing what they have control over and what they can fix, and that is their own action. And so the Serenity Prayer itself got incorporated into motivational aspects of the 12-step program. So thank you, Gamma. You actually demonstrated to us on how the Serenity Prayer and the concept of changing the things we can and ignoring or staying away from the things we can't, and that it takes courage to change things, and also the wisdom to know the difference. What problems can we fix? What problems can we not fix? So thank you, Gamma. As usual, you add a very unique perspective to the topic of the day. So enjoy that walk with your dog. Also, something that is very important with today's topic of does avoiding a problem ever help? Let me tell you, the most important problem that you want to be sure to always avoid, and that is the problem that belongs to somebody else. It is a sign of dysfunction if we are trying to solve somebody else's problem. And on occasion, somebody will call us when they are having a problem. There are obvious solutions to their problem that don't include us, and we tell them that. And the person decides when they're having that problem, they're going to reach out, call us. We don't have the ability to solve the problem. We only have the ability to get sucked into somebody else's problem. And we don't have the ability to solve it. We do have the ability to set the boundary and say to the person, look, I feel for you. This is your problem. I need to step back. So I need to avoid this. The most important problems that we need to avoid are the problems that belong to other people. Very, very important point in psychology. Also, one of the things that can come up in retirement and as we get older is the question of whose problem is it only? We can only solve our own problems. We cannot solve other people's problems. So if you have a care recipient and a caregiver and a problem comes up, you need to identify whose problem is it. Let me give you a classic example, and I may have mentioned this in other videos. There may be a care recipient, let's say she has really bad knees, and she finds that if she uses her walker, gets up, and does too much activity, she has incredible pain at the end of the day and also while she's walking. And her doctor said, look, if you're not up for surgery, and I'm not even thinking surgery is a good option for you, then we really can't fix this knee problem. So the care recipient then will start becoming less active as a way to manage the pain. Now the caregiver sees that the care recipient is not walking as much, and then that creates a problem for the caregiver. They'll say, you got to get up and walk. You got to get up and walk. No wonder why you're depressed. No wonder why your diabetes blood sugar levels are not good. You need exercise. You need exercise. So you have a conflict there. One person's solution to one problem creates a problem for somebody else. And this can be a huge conflict within families. And my answer to that is the caregiver has to adjust their thinking and has to recognize whether or not the care recipient is walking or not is not their problem. And what's the first thing they say? Well, I'll tell you what is my problem. Once that person is no longer able to walk to the bathroom, I'm going to have to put them in a nursing home, and I don't want to. And so that's the reason why the caregiver applies verbal pressure, perhaps inappropriately, to the care recipient. And what does the care recipient say? Either I'm never going to a nursing home, or I'm okay with that. It's too much pain for me to get up and walk throughout the day, so I'm going to sit in the chair. So these are real challenges that can come up in some families when there's a caregiver care recipient relationship and there's a conflict. That oftentimes you may need a healthcare provider or even a psychologist to help you sort through whose problem is it, because you can fix your own problems, but you can't fix somebody else's problems. And giving somebody support is different. Giving them support to solve their own problems is different than each person has to decide what's their solution. You can't decide the solution to somebody else's problem and then implement it. That doesn't work. That's dysfunction. So I perhaps could spend a whole video talking about that topic, how to be supportive when family members, especially if they kind of are connected, one's the caregiver, one's the care recipient. What are you going to do when you have different ideas about what's the problem? Care recipient views the problem as the pain when they get up and walk, and the caregiver views the problem as they're not getting up and walking. So a super challenge that is becoming more and more common, I think, within families. So we've already looked at whose problem is it, and most problems can be fixed. That's critical, especially with healthcare, with healthy or successful aging. We're having a new symptom. We don't feel well. The solution to that problem is call the doctor, go to the doctor. That is very straightforward. A lot in healthcare now is what's called preventative medicine. Our mammograms, our colonoscopies, our skin checks, some of the skin checks, those are all preventative. The idea being, if there is a medical, and all those three are cancer problem, you want to catch it. You want to be proactive and catch it very, very early. And then there's a very good chance that problem stays very little, gets cured with very little agitation or problem. And yet if we avoid going to the doctor, if we avoid our preventative medicine, we put ourselves at risk of having the problem of finding out about a cancer after it's fairly advanced and difficult to treat. So that's an example how getting out in front of problems, potential healthcare problems, it's very important to be proactive. And you might be asking the question, if a problem can be fixed, why, from my perspective, is that other person choosing not to fix the problem? And that's probably the whole reason why the 12-step programs incorporated the concept of the Serenity Prayer. It has to do with the experience of that person. You can't fix that other person. Each one of us makes a decision about what we're going to do each day. What are we going to avoid? What problems are we going to solve? And then the old issue of 12-step concept denial. Denial, the person really can't see the problem. In most of the time, people can see when they're having a problem, and they may choose not to fix or address the problem because the solution creates more anxiety than the problem itself. Okay, let's say that somebody has a adult child who's never worked. They're, let's say, for example, 40 years old, and the parent is getting older and recognizing I'm not going to be around forever. I don't know what's I don't know how my child is going to be able to support his or herself when I'm no longer here. And my view as a psychologist is there's some sort of diagnosis there, probably behavioral health. You have to get that assessed and figure out how to move forward. But the parent doesn't want to push or advocate or work with a healthcare provider on how to do that appropriately because there's too much anxiety about how is my child, 40-year-old adult child, going to react if they learn, they probably already know, that they have a major mental illness and they are avoiding that. So a senior may decide to avoid addressing the problem of, I've got an adult who's obviously not functioning as an adult, and I'm deciding to avoid that problem. That is a problem that will always get worse the longer you avoid it. The person who has the ability to put, influence toward that person towards the solution of the problem is choosing not to because it causes too much anxiety in the observer, the solution, the moving forward, the unknown of moving forward. So that can be a primary reason why people will avoid a problem that can be fixed. Also, some people avoid problems that can be fixed because they don't really know how to fix them. That can happen. Somebody can have a family member who's struggling with an addiction, maybe struggling with everything in their life, and other family members are like, I don't even know how to begin to guide that person. I don't know how you even solve a problem like that. And so then they'll choose to avoid it rather than seeking out some support on how to figure out how can I be supportive to somebody with that problem. So that's the second reason why somebody may choose to avoid a problem that they are either within their own life or that they're seeing. Another reason why people can avoid problems, and I see this in my work, not each week, but from time to time, I'll see this in my daily work, working as a clinical psychologist. The person sees the problem. They know what the solutions are. It's just of the options of the solution, none of those are options they like. And so I've encountered this. I had somebody last week who went to the pharmacy and found out with a new medication the doctor just prescribed, and they said to the pharmacist, I can't afford that. I can't afford that. So the pharmacist, thank goodness, went through all the different ways. There's PACE, there's like PACE-Net here in Pennsylvania. There's other programs available to help seniors pay for the medication. Here's what the problem is. The person doesn't qualify for needs-based. They have a huge, huge lump sum of money sitting in the bank. And in their mind, that's earmarked for an inheritance for the younger family members. So in their mind, that's not available to help pay for the medication. And I said to the person, I said, you know what? I do see this from time to time where seniors are recognizing now that they are on a fixed income. And so they're thinking they're going to live on that income, and then an expense for their own care will come up that's beyond what's coming in each month. And they don't want to go to the nest egg because in their mind that's going to the children. And I said, this actually is a huge problem. I mean, in some situations. So, and I don't know what to tell people. The other issue is that somebody needs help at home. They can't afford to pay for it. And I'll say to them, you have to connect with either a social worker or an elder law attorney, because the idea then is to spend down all of your assets, then you qualify for Medicaid, and then all of that care is paid for. And people say, I don't want to spend down the Medicaid. So they get caught kind of in limbo with the system because they don't agree with all of their money having to be spent on their own care needs. I can't tell you there's sort of a cultural, some of it might be generational, some of it might be individuals. And when I say to them, but that's sort of the plan, I said, if you were to contact, say, an elected official and say, we need to get a policy so seniors can get assistance in paying for the medicine, the first thing that elected official will say, oh, we have that. We have the PACE net. And what the person is leaving out is that idea of the spend down. They don't agree with the spend down. That in their mind, that money is to stay in the bank account for the inheritance of other family members. So that's a super challenge where somebody's got a problem. They know what the solution is, which is a spend down or using the money, huge amount of money in the savings account to pay for the medication, but they don't like those options. And so that can be a reason why somebody has a problem and they seem to be avoiding the problem, where they know what the problem is, they know what the solutions are, but they don't agree with the solutions. So, by the way, it's part of the reason why I put together the Dish on Aging every week is to bring to people's attention some of these factors about aging that the world just does not understand. The idea being that this information can come into your life, into your knowledge in advance, because the reality is we are interacting with the reality of the world. And that's just the way that we move forward, and coping and trying to be as successful as we can of navigating problems and solutions in life is to kind of understand the rules of life, the rules of the road. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I will see you next week where we will be talking about, how do I talk with my spouse and my family members about my financial future? Very important topic. I'll see you then. Have a great